We're going to turn now to Rikers Island. Advocates say that the city's Department of Correction has been struggling to provide adequate reentry services and programming to detainees at the jail complex. We'll explain what that's all about. This all began when the agency ended its $17 million contract with 5 nonprofits that had initially been doing this work and instead decided to provide the programming itself. However, thousands of detainees have since received fewer services than before. That's according to the mayor's management report. Earlier this year, the Adams administration announced that it will dedicate $14 million to the DOC to restore programming at the jail complex, but advocates and critics say that it is too little, too late. I'm joined now by a special panel to talk about this. Stanley Richards is the CEO of the Fortune Society. He was formerly incarcerated himself and recently worked at the Department of Correction as the number 2 administrator. Jonathan Monsalve is the interim president and CEO of the Osborne Association, which has been doing this work since 1933. Thank you both for being here. And your organizations are not some fly-by-night outfits. You've been doing it, Fortune Society since the 60s, Osborne since the 30s. You basically invented this field of working with people so that they have better options and don't get back into the problems that led them to jail in the first place. Why would the city cut back your funding? What did they tell you?
I think oftentimes when cities get into budget crunches, the first things to go are the services that impact some of the most vulnerable New Yorkers, some of the most vulnerable people in our society. And the Department of Correction made the recommendation to cut programming and to assume the responsibility of both meeting the legal mandate of minimum number of hours of services for people incarcerated. And they haven't done that. Commissioner Torres, First Deputy Commissioner Torres, in her last testimony with City Council admitted that they have not been able to resume services at the level that we were providing. And so it's a dollar cut that has rippling effects for people who are incarcerated.
Yeah, I would assume that it's understood that this is just fundamental to public safety, that you have to provide some services because nearly every single person at Rikers Island is going to be back in their neighborhood in a matter of probably a couple of dozen months, right?
That's right, Errol. And we think it's also a short-sighted attempt here to save some dollars. At the end of the day, we are employing individuals who are from these communities, have experienced incarceration themselves as well. And that brings an incredible amount of trust and credibility to the work that we do on the inside. And a lot of what we do is geared towards supporting people while they're on the inside, but also when they come home. We're from these communities, and we want to make sure that we're there to help them transition back to the community successfully when they're able to come home or if they're lucky enough to come home.
Sure. And again, not a gift to an individual, but just part of public safety for the community back home, right?
That's right.
Let's take a look at what we're talking about here. Impacts of cuts in this first chart. One-on-one programming we see has been cut, and these are city numbers. So these are real numbers for the first 4 months of the fiscal year, down 30% in one-on-one programming, and down 28% for group sessions. So talk about the sort of the real world impact of that. What does that mean if instead of being able to sit with a counselor and kind of get your life straight, it just doesn't happen?
I think, we all know boredom in jail is a breeding ground for violence and agitation. It is a breeding ground for officers to get hurt, for other incarcerated people to get hurt. And so the services that we were providing was for support for the individuals who are incarcerated, but also for the officers. Because when people are engaged, when people engage to a point where they have some hope that tomorrow is going to be better than today, that the future is going to be better than their past, that breeds a kind of calmness and provides for jail management. And without those services, people are feeling disconnected, people are feeling hopeless. And when people feel hurt people hurt people.
Sure. And while it might seem like a good place to save some money, say, oh, well, we'll just do it in-house, right? We've got the staff here and so forth. It seems that there's a fundamental incompatibility with being the person who's in charge of, sort of custody and discipline and counseling, which implies a different kind of a conversation, a certain amount of vulnerability, certainly not rules enforcement.
I think so. I mean, our programs were not social or recreational in nature. They were preventative, they were professional, they were practical approaches to helping reduce violence and support people when they come home. And the other thing to state here is that they were also being provided by experts, folks who are experts in the job training field, relationship coaching and parenting support. And so at the end of the day, this trauma-informed approach that we bring, I think, would be very difficult to have others who are not outside providers bring into the facility.
Right. I mean, because, a lot of this is like real basic stuff, right? How to, like, make sure you don't fall behind on your rent, and how to, how to manage a household, that sort of a thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The other slide I wanted to call some attention to is the impact of cuts again. Group programming down 29%, one-on-one sessions down 30%, detainee participants down 6%. Again, these are the city's own numbers. This is not you guys, sort of coming in at them as advocates and so forth. If the city, by their own standards, are cutting back services that much, talk about it from the inside as the person who used to help run that whole complex.
Yeah, I think we, as a city, are missing a huge opportunity. I think part of what we wanted to do and what we've been doing in providing jail-based services is really provide the bridge from incarceration to the community. We know the majority of the people who are incarcerated are going to come home to our community. And people don't come home a blank. They come home, as I said before, with hope, connection to services, with some willingness and capacity to build a better life, get access to housing, substance abuse treatment, mental health treatment, job placement, job retention, job training skills. All those things we know make a difference for people when they come home from prison. So the work that Osborne Association is doing, Fortune Society's been doing, is about going further upstream, going into the sort of belly of where everything is happening and providing people with the services they need so that when they're ready to transition home, they have a connection and skills and services available to them.
I imagine it's in some ways maybe a heavy lift or a tough sell with elected officials to have them go to bat for these programs and this population.
Absolutely, but we also think this is one of the many programs that exist in an ecosystem to help drive down the jail population at Rikers. We know that we also need massive investments in decarceration efforts, things like diversion programs, alternative to incarceration programs. And Errol, I can tell you I've done that work on the ground and know that that comes at a cost savings to the taxpayer and New Yorkers. It also comes with some rehabilitation support as well. And so, we know that these are efforts that can help drive down the jail population and get things to a more manageable place.
You were part of a press conference that was held earlier this week at the Bayview, the former women's state prison, which is actually a few blocks from here. Talk a little bit about what's going to happen there, because it strikes me as the kind of an example of what is possible if you have a real partnership with the government. That's
exactly right. And there the vision is to provide supportive and affordable housing for people who are coming home from prison or who have experienced incarceration. We recognize that, there's a lot that a person may need when they're coming home, but if you don't have a place to rest your head at night where you feel safe and secure, it can be difficult to succeed at the job. It can be difficult to reconnect with your family. And so what we're looking to do there is turn a place that was a prison before into a place that's a welcoming home for New Yorkers who are returning home.
Very interesting. And so how do we get this baseline? How do we make it so that, we're not sitting around here year after year talking about this, where the first time there's a fiscal cloud that passes over the city, they start cutting these kind of services?
I think we have to make an investment and say we need our political leaders to say that this is not where we're going to cut. This is where we're going to invest in. Just like over the generations we have invested in mass incarceration, we need to have that same kind of willingness to invest in reentry. We need to have that same kind of willingness to invest in reentry housing, as Jonathan just described. We know that punishment, incarceration, and release to the communities does not equal safe communities. We know that we provide people an opportunity to rebuild their lives through education, through employment, through access to substance abuse and mental health treatment. We have better outcomes. I'm an example of that. As a formerly incarcerated person, the thing that helped me change my life was college and prison. It gave me hope that I've never had before. And that hope transformed my life, my family, my grandchildren. They now see me as an African-American man in the community who goes to work every single day trying to make this world, New York City, this work a little better for others.
And I mean, look, that's a bargain for society, right? I mean, your tuition couldn't have been all that much, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. What it cost for me to spend the years I spent on Rikers Island and how many years I spent in state prison could have been absolutely used differently for others. And so we need to have the political will to say, enough is enough. We're going to make the right investments, and we're going to sustain those investments, just like we sustain the investments to build mass incarceration in this country.
Okay. Stanley Richards, Jonathan Monsalve, thank you so much for coming by. We'll talk again soon. That is going to do it for tonight's show. Thanks so much for watching, and have a